Good morning. Thank you. Welcome to the opening session of the 2024 NEWEA Annual Conference. We're so glad that you could be with us today. Last year's conference was a great success, and we think this year is shaping up to be even better. We have a record number of technical sessions with 37. Our exhibit hall on the 3rd and 4th floors is sold out, and we have a record number of attendees. Thank you, Bob. I'd just like to highlight a few of the events in our packed program. This afternoon, we have a new Young Professionals interactive workshop where we'll be teaching the fundamentals of centrifugal pump design while also having a discussion on practical applications and doing a guided tour of the exhibits hall so that attendees can speak with pump vendors at their booths. Yeah, we're really excited. I think it's a great addition. The graduate and undergraduate poster session is today in the 3rd floor atrium. And tomorrow there will be a full-day program organized by NEWEA's Innovation Council. The program will include innovator exhibits and then a technical session in the afternoon. There's also a plenary session tomorrow morning entitled Our One Water Future. The first half of the session will feature a panel of experts discussing funding, environmental stewardship and planning, public outreach and partnerships. And during this session, we will dig into the issues that matter most to clean water professionals. In the second half of the session, it'll feature pitches from leading innovators on the technologies they are developing as potential solutions to the challenges that our industry faces. As noted, these are just a few highlights from our program, so please be sure to consult the mobile app and the paper program. We'd also like to thank all the speakers, exhibitors, volunteers, sponsors, and attendees at this year's conference. You made it possible for NEWEA to organize the excellent program that we have planned for you. So thank you very much. We'll do another. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bob Fischer, who is the current NEWEA president through the end of this conference. Bob is the Water Quality Superintendent for South Burlington, Vermont. Bob?
Thank you all. I am so very happy, humbled, and honored to be here to welcome you to the 2024 New England Water Environment Association Annual Conference. We have over 2,700 of the top regulators, engineers, operators, vendors, not just in the Northeast, but in the world right here. I mean, this is excellence. You're looking at excellence right here. You're all here, they're all collaborating, one water, as it says on the thing. You're all here collaborating together, giving your expertise, spreading the knowledge, all for the good of public health, the environment, and the future. This is no different than 1929 when it started. It's just excellence all along. Now, are we 1929? No, because look at us now. We're larger. I mean, most of them in 1929 looked like me, young, slightly thinning. And now, you see great diversity here. And then once again, that just strengthens us all. I am the outgoing NEWEA president. I'm usually very quiet and reserved, so I'm really not sure why they call me that. But I just, need to, my theme, as you all know, is one water. Or as my wife has said, if I hear one water one more time, I will strangle you. Nonetheless, collaboration, is efficiencies. And one person can't do it all. And this is excellence right here. And we're stronger together, all of us. The water organizations, NGOs, regulators, we're all working for public health, the environment, and the future. So, I'm just beyond honored again. It's so important and it's so organic, though. So even after I'm done, One Water will continue because efficiencies will always rise to the top. And when you have, we're doing this much, and someone else is doing this much, and the work is this much, all of us together can do this much. It can be pretty depressing. The last thing we need to do is not collaborate and work together, because the tasks are huge, as we all know. But this is excellence, and just like 1929, we advance, the organization advances, and I'm just so honored, humbled, and proud to be here. With that, I'd like to introduce Aimeé Killeen, the WEF president. I'm on the Canadian border of Vermont, and she is on the Gulf Coast in Louisiana. So we kind of have the whole breadth of the country here. I have water. My water's frozen. And she has lots of water herself. So please welcome Aimeé. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I told somebody when I walked in here that I would be shivering by the time I got up here, and I am. 75 is cold to me, so I am absolutely excited to be here this week, where we have the opportunity, everyone here, to share, connect, and explore how we all as water workers can lead the way towards a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable water future, moving towards WEF's vision of a life free of water challenges. NEWEA at the national level, in case y'all don't know, y'all are absolutely a leader among our member associations. Y'all are doing great and very important work. But no matter how much we all do, it is not hard to recognize that we are living in a time of unprecedented water challenges. From climate change, I had icicles on my roof this week in South Louisiana, south of New Orleans. So, climate change is here. These challenges we have, we also were seeing population shifts and growth, right, since COVID. We also know we all have aging infrastructure and emerging contaminants to work through. These challenges require us to be bold, innovative, and collaborative in our approach to water management. These challenges also require us to adopt a circular water economy mindset, where we view water as a valuable resource that can be recovered, reused, and regenerated, rather than a waste that needs to be disposed of. As water sector leaders, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to transform the way we use and value water in our society. We are the ones who can implement innovative solutions that enhance water quality, protect public health, reduce environmental impacts, and increase customer satisfaction. We are the ones who can forge partnerships with other sectors, such as energy, agriculture, industry, and stakeholders. You are the ones that inspire and educate your customers about the importance of water conservation, efficiency, and stewardship. This conference and all of our MA conferences throughout the country are designed to help you further your knowledge and work towards these goals. Over the next several days, we'll all hear from experts and our peers who will share their insights and experiences on topics such as the circular water economy, the digital transformation, customer engagement. We talked about workforce development this morning. You'll also have the opportunity to network with your peers, which I can't just say how important networking and knowing people from all over your area and all across the country is. So I hope you enjoy this conference. I find it very valuable. This is my third time to attend NEWEA for your professional development. I also hope you leave this conference with that renewed sense of purpose, of passion for your work. NEWEA is very important to WEF. You are important to your leadership in other member associations, although you may not see it here in your work specifically within NEWEA. Together, we all collectively will make a difference and create that life free of water challenges for ourselves and our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Aimeé. I'm just going to pause the presentation behind me. Oh, That's not the right slide, though. One moment. Okay. That's the right slide. Thank you. Well, it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. Oh, I moved again. I'm so sorry. Try this again. It is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Jonathan Gruber. Dr. Gruber is the Ford Professor of Economics and the chairman of the Economics Department at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he has taught since 1992. He is a member of the Institute of Medicine, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the National Academy of Social Insurance, and the Econometric Society. He has published more than 180 research articles, has edited 6 volumes, and is the author of multiple texts, including Jumpstarting America, How Breakthrough Science Can Revive Growth and the American Dream. In 2011, he was named one of the top 25 most innovative and practical thinkers of our time by Slate magazine. And in 2020, he received a Guggenheim Fellowship. We are thrilled to have such an advocate for the funding of science and innovation joining us today. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Jonathan Gruber.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm really honored to be here. Show you how honored I am. This is the first tie I've worn since COVID. Okay, so I'm really, really honored to be here. The work y'all are doing is amazing. When I heard the number of attendees, I was astonished. You all know that the work you're doing is so important to all of us, and yet it's not appreciated. So I'm here to say thank you for what you do, and I'm excited to talk today about my book, Jumpstarting America, which I wrote with Simon Johnson at MIT, and more generally about thinking about innovation, which is so central to your sector as well as all others. So I want to start by casting your mind back. Think about spring 1940. For those who are history buffs, well, in spring 1940, things looked pretty bleak for the Allies. Germany had just blitzkrieged across Europe, chasing everyone out. Meanwhile, the US Army could not develop torpedoes that could actually hit things, had soldiers practicing with broomsticks, and had produced something like 3 tanks in the previous year. In that era, a man named Vannevar Bush, sort of the hero of our story, had a one-on-one meeting with FDR. And Vannevar Bush said, look, the key to winning the war is technology, is science. I want you to write me a blank check to create the scientific community that will win this war. And FDR did. And Vannevar Bush set up an organization which at one point employed 2/3 of all physicists in the United States. And this organization did create the technology that won the war, most fundamentally radar. Before the US controlled radar, we were losing 100 boats a month to U-boats in the Atlantic Ocean. After development of radar, we lost virtually none. And it really, obviously, human sacrifice played a huge role. I don't want to diminish that. But this new technology really turned the tide of the war. But the key thing was, after the war, Vannevar Bush went back to Truman and said, let's not stop. We've won the war, let's win the peace. Let's continue to invest in science. And invest we did. The US government threw massive resources at science. By the mid-1960s, 2% of the entire US GDP was publicly funded science in America. 1 in every $50 went to things like NASA, NIH, and other Department of Energy and other organizations doing research. And the results were astonishing. The results were essentially the basis for all the technologies we enjoy today. Everything on your iPhone, your GPS, satellites. Remember, what was the first microwave oven called? Does anyone remember? The radar range. Why is it called the radar range? Because it came from the invention of radar. That's where the microwave came from. Okay? Basically, all the consumer technologies, all the producer technologies we use today have their basis in that era. The drugs that have changed our life had the basis in the NIH funding of that era. And importantly, the private companies have their basis. Okay? Before World War II, there was a company called International Business Machines, which was a small it wasn't small, but it was an enormous company doing sort of nascent computer work. It was the government contract to develop missile systems that turned IBM into what it became, because it kickstarted IBM's development of the tools. It then took the tools that it used from this government contract to develop the systems for air traffic control that all our nation's planes use today. That came out of a military contract. Okay? All these contracts, what we call the military-industrial complex, in all its negativity, had a positive effect on science and development of things that we use today. Okay? But the good times didn't last. Okay? And once again, I'm summarizing a long book fairly quickly. I'd be delighted if you'd read it, and you can learn more about the history. But roughly speaking, starting in the late 1960s, public support for science diminished. And that was for three reasons. First of all, honestly, the hubris of the scientists themselves. Scientists said, don't worry about nuclear radiation while they're working on inventing a nuclear pen. And it turned out they were wrong. We didn't have to worry about it. In 1960, the Time Magazine Man of the Year, remember it was man back then, the Time Magazine Man of the Year was the scientist. Can you imagine that today? That's the kind of level of amazing support scientists had, and they got a little big in the head for it. Second was scientists started disagreeing with politicians. Scientists and politicians were on the same page until the Vietnam War. When scientists started saying, wait a second, we don't like the way you deploy technology, they started disagreeing. And as the saying goes, if you speak truth to power, power will cut your funding. And that's what happened. And then finally, the US government started spending its money in different ways. We grew a large social welfare state that's delivered miraculous outcomes through Medicare and Medicaid and other things. We fought the Vietnam War, which is expensive. We then, in the 1980s, had a tax revolution of massive reductions in the taxes in the US. Overall, funding shrunk. As a result, today, US spending on science is below 0.6% of GDP. We've gone from roughly twice the next biggest country in the world to 14th in the world, and somewhere between equal or half of China in terms of the amount of our economy we devote to research and development. Now, you might say, why do I care? Research and development, yeah, sure, the government needs to do it in World War II, but now it's something private companies do, and indeed, private R&D has grown as public R&D has shrunk. So you might say, what's the problem? We kick-started it with the government, now the private companies do it. The answer, and no one knows this better than you all, sorry to the private vendors here, the answer is that private R&D doesn't get it done. And it doesn't get it done for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that private R&D is about internal returns, not social returns. Private R&D is about what's best for the company, not what's best for society. So the story we tell in the book that I quite like is the development of statins. Many of us in this room, one won't make you raise your hands. Many of this room may be on statins. They're a miraculous drug that save about 200,000 lives a year. Okay? Statins were initially being developed in the early 1980s in collaboration between Merck and a Japanese drug company. The Japanese drug company found that during drug trials, some animals died, some dogs died. And the Japanese drug company shut down the trials. Now, Merck went to that company and said, hey, we want to know what happened. Let's collaborate. Let's figure this out. Maybe we can work together. And the Japanese company said, no, you're a rival. We're not sharing this with you. So Merck freaked out, shut down their trials as well. 5 years later, the government sponsored new trials of statins. Turned out what happened to the dogs had nothing to do with the drugs. And statins were invented 5 years later. That's 1 million lives that were lost because companies were focused on their own private returns and not in the social returns of R&D. The social returns of R&D are enormous. Private companies need to do more of it, but it's not enough. The public needs to be involved as well. Add on top of this the fact of how is private company R&D financed? It's financed largely through the venture capital sector. A miraculous story. 1/6 of stock market value today is companies that were funded by venture capital. It's a miraculous story. We all hear about the US venture capital sector. What we don't hear about is how ill-equipped venture capital is to make the investments we need to fundamentally move technology ahead. Venture capitalists today follow what's called the spray and pray model. What that model means, they invest a little amount of money in lots of different companies, hope one becomes Facebook. Okay? That works great for software when it's a quick turnaround time, when you can know within a couple years whether things are going to work or not. And if they don't work, you can get out. That doesn't work well for capital-intensive, long-run innovative technologies. Let me give another example, okay? One thing I like about the book is we miss sort of the kind of, ivory tower, boring research I do with real fun real-world examples. Okay, this is about a battery technology company here in Boston, which was innovating in lithium-ion batteries, really the cutting edge of batteries. And they were doing a great job. They had customers including Saab and Hewlett-Packard. But they wanted to expand. They were a startup, they wanted to expand. And they wanted to build a new plant in Auburn, Massachusetts, a community that needed the jobs. They was going to provide 100 jobs in this new plant in Auburn, Massachusetts. But they needed $50 million. And no venture capitalists would give it to them. They said, look, the plant's going to take 10 years. That's a really expensive investment. We'd rather spend $5 million each on 10 different things and see what pops. Well, no U.S. venture capitalists would. The Chinese venture capitalists, backed by the Chinese government, were happy to give them that money, with one small caveat, which is the plant got built in China, not in the U.S. And that is exactly what we see over and over again of the failures of our financing system to invest in new and innovative technologies which are capital intensive and take a long time to develop. So that is the problem with relying on the private sector to do R&D. Now, you might say, well, you might not even say, it's what I say to my students in my basic economics class. I say, look, just because the private market can't do something doesn't mean the government can do it better. Okay, we've all dealt with government problems in our lives. We can't say that. But in fact, in this case, the evidence is clear the government can do it well. That the returns to public R&D aren't enormous. And to illustrate this, there's no better story than what happened when in the mid-1980s, the Nobel Prize-winning biologist, Gilbert, wanted to start a new company. He'd won the Nobel Prize for discovering how you could sequence a gene. And he wanted to set up a new company that would sequence all the genes in the human body, the human genome. And he said, once we do this, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Now he said, look, doing this is going to take decades, and when I do it, I'm going to make it public. So he went to funders and said, I'd like $10 million to start. And no one would give him the money, because they're like, why should we give you the money? You're going to make it public anyway. Where's the profit for us? So he couldn't start his company. Fortunately, a number of years later, he and other scientists were able to convince Congress to set up what was called the Human Genome Project, a $3 billion investment in mapping the human genome. Today, the genomics industry in America is a behemoth that is changing the world. The genomics industry in America employs something like 700,000 people, and in 1 year pays $6 billion in taxes. Twice the $3 billion investment that we put into it in stock. And let's not forget, it saved lives during COVID. We don't have the mRNA vaccines without the Human Genome Project. They are a direct link from public science to life-saving, job-creating innovations. Okay, we wrote our book before COVID, and in the paperback version, in the introduction, we say, basically we ran the out-of-sample test, which is, do we need public R&D? And the answer is yes. Because how did these vaccines come about? They came about, A, because of the Human Genome Project, and B, because the government invested in the specific R&D of mRNA and made it happen. So we have a situation where the returns to science are huge. The private sector by itself is not getting it done. The public sector can help. But then the question is, can they benefit people? And here, the private sector and the public sector have both fallen down on the job. And why have they fallen down on the job? And this is as much Vannevar Bush's fault as generations since. It was a bunch of elitist scientists, like folks at MIT, who thought, well, all the good work has to happen here in Cambridge, or in Berkeley, or in New York, these places where there is elite institutions and where we've already gotten started. And as a result, we have developed science incredibly unequally in America. Not water's served everywhere, but general technology. 75% of all the jobs in high-tech industries in the last 15 years have been created in 5 cities. In a country as large as America, 75% of all the venture capital in the United States is just in 6 cities. How can we develop as a nation of 350 million people, when we've got all that concentrated in a few cities? Now, you might say, well, look, we'll just have everyone move to those cities. Why not? This, it's Boston, New York, D.C., Seattle, San Francisco, L.A. We'll just have everyone move there. The problem is the cities don't want them. How do we know that? They won't build the housing. So these cities, which are creating all these jobs, are actually shrinking relative to the rest of the country because they won't build the housing. In 1980, the top 10 highest wage cities in America, 2 were on the coast, okay? And the average house price in the highest wage cities in America was 25% higher than the average city. Today, of the top 10 highest wage cities in America, 9 are on the coast, and the average house price is 300% of the average house price in the average city in America. So yes, we've put the jobs in these places, but people can't afford to live there. They can't go there. And we're creating the divisions in America that we've seen not just economically, but politically. If you survey people and ask them, do you believe in public investment in science? People on the coast say yes. People in the rest of the country say no. Why? Because they're not seeing the returns. Why should they? Okay? And yet, there are places all over this country that can become the technology hubs of tomorrow. Okay? Technology hubs are not dictated by God. Okay? Let's remember, where did Microsoft start? Albuquerque, New Mexico. Bill Gates dropped out of college, went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Why? The weather was great. We can all see the problems with weather today. The weather was great. There was a national laboratory, and Seattle was a dump. There was a sign at the airport in Seattle which said, with the last one out, please turn off the lights. The murder rate was twice that of Albuquerque, New Mexico. But a few years later, Bill Gates really missed home. Good Lord knows why. He missed the rain, I guess. So he moved Microsoft to Seattle. And the rest is history. Indeed, in 1994, when Jeff Bezos gets in his car in New York, literally just jumped in his car and said, I'm going to head west and start a new company. Did he go to his hometown of Albuquerque, New Mexico? No, he went to Seattle. Okay? Things shake out differently, and Walter White is cooking meth in Seattle. And Albuquerque is a technology hub. Technology hubs are not dictated. They're ultimately created by humans and by investments. Okay, let me ask you a question. I'm guessing there's about 600 people here. I've asked this question about 2,400 people, and 18 have gotten it right. So don't feel bad if you get it wrong. And no fair answering if you've read the book. Okay, thanks for reading the book, but no fair answering. Don't yell out the answer, please. What city in America is the home to the largest university by enrollment? Sometimes it's first or second. And the hub of the computer simulation industry for America and the world. Stop and think for a second. Large university in America, hub of the computer simulation industry. Stop and think. Make your guess. Okay, now I need an honest answer and no fear if you read the book. How many people guessed Orlando, Florida? Don't feel bad. You just helping my statistics. I'm now 18 for 3,000. Okay? Why Orlando, Florida? Great story. 1956, the editor of the Orlando Sentinel endorses a little-known politician named Lyndon Johnson for president. 1960, he endorsed him again. 1964, he throws him a big parade. So Lyndon Johnson calls him up and says, look, you've been great to me. What do you want for Orlando? And this editor says, we want a Navy base. Now, does Lyndon Johnson let the fact that Orlando is landlocked stop him? No, he's Lyndon Johnson. They build a Navy base in Orlando, Florida. They even put a cement ship out front. Now, what do you do at a landlocked Navy base? You train. And one element of training was there was a small unit on Long Island that was a battle simulation unit. They moved to this new Navy base in Orlando. Fast forward to 1978. In 1978, there's a very innovative president of a mediocre college called the University of Central Florida, recently renamed University of Central Florida. And he said, look, land here is really cheap. Interest rates are through the roof. Land's really cheap. He goes to the Navy base, and he says, look, you've got this unit there doing sort of early computer simulation of battle. What if we moved that unit below the university and built a research park around it? We're even going to shape it like a dollar sign so contractors know that there is government money coming here to fund research on simulation. And they did it. Today, the Central Florida Research Park employs 10,000 people. East Orange County, 45 minutes from Disney, nothing to do with Disney, has added 100,000 jobs in 30 years. And the University of Central Florida is now the largest university in America and is the 8th-ranked electrical engineering department. Okay? That is a wonderful story of creating new technology hubs, except I went and met with the head of the Central Florida Research Park. I said, this is great. He said, well, it's pretty good, but what happens is all these companies come here, they start up, they get to about 15, 20 employees, and they leave. They go to Boston, New York, San Francisco, Seattle. And I said, why? He said, well, first of all, we have no venture capital. We're 45th in the country, so there's no money to invest in them. Second of all, education sucks here in Florida. We're like 40th in the nation in education. So they want to place a more educated workforce. And that inspired my co-author and I to realize that we can bring together these two ideas. More investment in science and spreading it around America. And that's why we came up with our idea of jump-starting America, which is to say, let's have the government set up new technology hubs, invest in new technology hubs around the country. Indeed, let's have the government copy Amazon. What did Amazon do when it wanted a headquarters too? Remember this about 5 years ago? Amazon held the bidding for HQ2. Cities bidded. Ultimately, New York and DC won. But the bidding was about who could give them the biggest tax break, let's be frank. What if we did that right? What if instead of a race to the bottom of who can give a private company the biggest tax break, we had a race to the top? We had a competition where places could compete to be the best place to send a new major government investment. Places like Rochester, New York. Rochester, New York has some of the best universities in the country, technologically. They have an incredibly educated population, and the average house price is $170,000, or roughly annual rent in Boston. Okay? Indeed, we went to the data. We found there are 102 places in America with at least 200,000 people, highly educated, and an average house price below $200,000. There are places all over the country, from Rochester, New York, to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to Logan, Utah, all over the country, great universities, educated population ready to go, but they need that jump start. So we suggested let's have a competition where the government makes major investments in new places with new science to try to really kick off spreading the wealth of new technology. And we hoped that to create as well sort of a virtuous feedback loop politically, which is right now, if the government was out, we talked to many politicians from both sides of the aisle. They all love science and aren't. They're all like, yes, we love science, we love science. When time comes for appropriation, they don't appropriate the money. Because at the end of the day, except for the few superstar cities on the coast, their voters don't care. Let's make the voters care. Let's make the voters care by helping them understand that science is jobs. The way we create good, high-paying jobs in America is with more science. And let's make that happen by spreading the wealth. Now, I'm really pleased to report that this idea caught on. I likened the book to a well-reviewed art film in that nobody saw it, but it had some influence. President Biden, you may have heard of the CHIPS and Science Act. We were very helpful on the science part of that act, and indeed, in that act, they put in a $10 billion tech hub competition of the type we suggested in the book. They've done the first round, 31 places have qualified, they've already appropriated $500 million. The president's budget has $4 billion in it this year. We'll see what happens with budget politics, but $4 billion this year to fund places to compete to show that they have everything they can do to make a good new tech hub. They have the educated population, they have the housing, they have a plan in place where businesses and universities and governments work together to become these next generation tech hubs. This can work, and we hope it will work. And we hope that it will allow us to regain the lead in science that we've lost. And let me end with sort of one topic that's near and dear to my heart that's related to you all. Many of you may know we spend 160 times as much exploring space as we spend exploring the ocean. Yet what is more vital to our life? The ocean or space? The ocean. Okay, I am an avid snorkeler. I've snorkeled all over the world. I love the ocean. I love what I see, and it's amazing how little we know about the ocean. Now, we actually led the world in ocean exploration. At Woods Hole, they developed the submersible that go the lowest in the world. And it may have been noted a number of years ago, it exploded. And the government did not invest in replacing it. But China has. China now has the submersibles that go the lowest in the world. And they're dealing with, in fact, the newest treasure trove of wealth in the world, which is rare earths at the bottom of the ocean. Rare earths at the bottom of the ocean are much richer than anywhere else in the world, but getting them can do enormous environmental damage. Who do we want to be in charge of getting them? Do we want the U.S. to play a leadership role and make sure we, in an environmentally responsible way, go after those rare earths, or do we want to cede that role to the rest of the world? This is the kind of issue where the U.S. needs to play a scientific, a political, a leadership role. And there's many, I'm not an expert on water. I'm amazed at this conference and all the people that are here, but there are many issues near and dear to you all where you have seen both the good and the bad of the role the government could play. Let's focus on the good. Let's put our money into the kind of research that can help you all move ahead and understanding how that can make America a better place. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. I think we might have time for, do we have time for?
We do. That's
We
what
have
I
time
was
for a
just
couple
gonna
of questions? I'm sure I've been sufficiently uncontroversial. None of you want to ask questions, but just in case. Question? Yeah.
Great talk. You touched on the cost of living in the cities and obviously cost of living across the country and various things. One thing you didn't touch on, and obviously your talk was on the investment in science and engineers, but you didn't touch on the exorbitant cost of education.
Absolutely. You know, you're looking at me. I'm one of those people who's written a $250 textbook. I totally understand that. It's a huge problem. I think that we have an enormous amount of innovation we can do to address that. I think that we haven't begun to tap the possibilities of online education as a way of democratizing education in the US. And I think more generally, we need to think about what level of education is right for what people. So at the Central Florida Research Park, I'm told for every PhD scientist they need 10 lab techs. You don't need a degree from a top university to be a lab tech. Why aren't we training those people? Why aren't we setting up these places to allow folks to develop the skills they need to get to the without taking on massive student debt? So I think you're absolutely right. We address the education. We address the education at all levels, let's be clear, all the way down to elementary school and on. What was one of the major things the US government did in the wake of World War II? The National Defense Education Act. Anyone who's old in this crowd will have used microscopes paid for by the National Defense Education Act in their science classes. Okay? That is how we created the nation's post-World War II generation of engineers, was government funding of science. Let's do more of that. Let's make education more affordable, and let's create a next generation of skilled people who can earn high wages. Other questions? Yeah.
So, question of priorities, where the federal government should invest. You're arguing should invest in science. It's now investing in infrastructure as we deal with climate change. How does this all sort out? Your argument is, well, if you spread the wealth, spread the income, the generation of wealth further around the country, that'll kind of take care of itself. The budgets will be big enough, or are we going to hit something where we have to make some priority changes? And what would you say they are? I mean, should the government be funding infrastructure, or should states and locals? Where are we going? Of course, our defense challenges are enormous.
An economics question. I love it.
Yes.
So basically, roughly speaking, the government should be financing anything which is a higher rate of return than the cost of borrowing money. Right now, it costs the government, the interest rate on public debt is around 5%. So if there's an investment building a road, funding a lab that has a rate of return of more than 5%, we should do it. Okay? And the answer is the estimates of the social rate of return to more research and development are on the order of 25 to 50%. Now, the estimates on infrastructure are more mixed. I'm not an infrastructure expert. Okay? but the rate of return to science investment exceeds the government cost of borrowing. So we should absolutely more of it. The rest of the world has recognized that. The rest of the world is ramping up what they're doing on science. And the answer, and in the book we have example after example of industries born here in the US, some at MIT, that we have given up leadership on because we haven't made those investments. And I think the rate of return is high enough we need to. In the back, yeah.
I would just like you to comment on the external cost for the development of some of these features that we call advancements, especially things we're doing now called PFAS. And, you know, this is not something anyone contemplated, and yet this is a room full of people who are having to deal with this as receivers.
Great question. You know, as I mentioned, the hubris of scientists in the 1960s, you know, Rachel Carson was such a shot across the bow. Silent Spring changed everything, and economists poo-pooed Silent Spring. Whatever, it's not a big deal. We can't do that anymore. We need to recognize that science needs to advance in a way that is responsible. And in particular, what we need to understand is that some of the most important developments aren't necessarily measured right away in GDP. Some of the most important developments are things which make us safer, not which generate wealth. But they might generate jobs in making us safer, and we should care about jobs and our well-being. So I think that basically you're absolutely right. We need to do this in a responsible way. But I also think we can't be too afraid, because while it's true new things will have unintended consequences, we can't address this problem without some new technologies. You know, talking to the experts here, it sounds like a nightmare to address it with the existing technologies. Let's invest in creating new technologies to deal with this, but let's have people along the way who understand the consequence, who understand the side effects. But let's not say, oh my God, new things have these side effects, let's not do new things. That's the worst possible outcome. There's another question back there, I think. Yeah. I think that at the end of the day, there's two things. First of all, most people think new tech is cool. So partly it's about helping them understand, I don't understand how incredibly interesting technologically your jobs are and what you're doing. I think a wastewater treatment plant, you know, the water comes in, it's through some pipes, it's out. You know, I don't understand the incredible technology that's going on to that. So partly it's showing it to people, okay? But partly it's making the economic case. Okay, it's making the economic case that when we invest in science, we create jobs. And that's the case that's made in the book, and it's a case for people to understand that this is how we grow as a country. This is how we move to the next phase in economic development as a country. And the way we compete internationally is to make these investments. It's the jobs we all need and the cool technology that really keeps us safe. Yeah.
Great presentation. I wanted to share an example of we benefited from your book. The city of Manchester, New Hampshire has recently issued a $44 million grant for a biofabrication center in Manchester, New Hampshire, and we competed with 500 other applicants. 21 projects were chosen, and ours was one of them for $44 million, led by Dean Kamen,
Yeah.
who again has been a large innovator in New Hampshire. So I want to thank you for your book and the benefit to our city of Manchester.
Well, that's congratulations to you guys. And this is what's the best part. So we didn't want to have a list of cities in our book, and our publisher said, have a list that are really cool, so put together a list. Manchester wasn't on it. You know what? And you guys showed that you could be a tech hub, that you could bring the resources together to become a new technology hub. And that is exactly what we need. We need that kind of innovative partnership and leadership to spread these jobs around America and to do it in important ways. So congratulations. Well, yeah.
So you talk about making an economic case in order to get the funding for various different things. But you also talked about, you know, investing in areas, you know, maybe in the middle of the country and not on the coast and, you know, cheaper areas. To bring education that yields, you know, technologies you make an economic case for something that you don't know what's going to exist?
That's a great question. That's sort of the fundamental challenge to what I do professionally, which is how do you use existing evidence to make a compelling argument that it will extrapolate. And I think all you can do is look to existing evidence and express why there's no reason it can't. In some sense, if you look at, for example, there's great studies which show that there's all these around the country, also what's called lost Einsteins. Kids who are as smart as these kids who are at MIT who are never even thinking of applying to MIT. And there's evidence that when you find them, they come and they're incredibly successful. We've done innovation at MIT that I love. I had nothing to do with this, my colleagues did it, where we have people all over the world take online MIT classes, and the 20 that do the best come to MIT to get a master's. These are kids who never would have come to MIT, and now they're coming. And we've now done this long enough we can see their success. We see them going on. So I think you're right, extrapolation is always dangerous, but we have enough examples of success. And the rate of return is high enough, but you also raise the fundamental challenge, the fundamental political challenge. And someone asked how you can help. Here's how you can help. Here's the challenge. And summarized in the saying that if a venture capitalist succeeds 1 out of 10 times, he's a hero. And if a politician fails 1 out of 10 times, he's a villain. Okay? And this is what we call the Solyndra problem. You may remember Solyndra. President Obama put about $40 billion into clean energy, 98% of which paid back. We wouldn't have Tesla. Let's forget we think about Elon Musk, but they're cool cars. We wouldn't have Tesla without this investment. And yet, 1.7% of it went to a company called Solyndra, which was essentially poorly run, perhaps criminally run, also had some bad luck, and went bust. They were hearing after hearing about Solyndra and how terrible it was. Nothing about the fact that any time portfolio where 98.7% of it returns, you'd be delighted. You'd be the richest investor in the world. How do we get the public to understand that if all your water districts innovate, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But on average, the rate of return is really high. On average, the innovations really pay off. And not let the failures dominate the story of successes. And part of the answer to the question back there is publicize the successes. You guys are doing incredible work that people like me know nothing about. Okay? Let's hear more about the success you're having in keeping us healthier and safer. Okay? Let that be known so that the news isn't dominated by failures. Other questions? All right, looks like I was totally clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gruber, for kickstarting our conference in such a thought-provoking manner. And thank you all for attending the opening session. We hope you have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.